So we have here this morning a story of two men. One, a tax collector, a man who paid Rome for the privilege of collecting taxes. So that once the district duty was met, once he had collected the money he needed to give back to Rome, anything over the top he could put in his own pocket. And so it was common for tax collectors to cheat and to tip the scales and all those kind of things so that they could make a little more money off the backs of their neighbors. For all intents and purposes, both culturally and according to the law, tax collectors were kind of moral degenerates, really. And then you have the other guy, a Pharisee. A Pharisee is the liberal arm of the temple religious elite. The Pharisees believed in the priesthood of all believers. They wanted to open the temple up to more people and make salvation available to more people. And he, of course, in the eyes of God, according to the Jewish law and according to social norms, was the good, righteous man. And so how does a good man, like this Pharisee, become an example of sin? And the other one, a sinner, become the example of righteousness? And ultimately, how does this happen to any of us? How do we start from or come from a place of we're basically good people, most of us, right? We pay our taxes, most of us. Right? We go to church on Sunday, we try to raise our kids right, we're basically pretty decent people, kind of like the Pharisee. And so how is it that some of us, probably all of us at some point, become unrighteous? Well, I think the story is really about that. And I think that the fundamental difference between the Pharisee and the tax collector is their eyes. So think about the story again. The Pharisee, oh God, thank God I'm not like these idiots. Right? And the tax collector, oh God. And there's a fundamental difference of the way they look at the world and the way they look at themselves and the way they look at other people. Where we look and what we focus on, I think, becomes a very big hint into whether or not we are actually righteous or just think we are. Now, Jesus was clear. Jesus said, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the orphan and the widow, and heal in my name. That was it. Jesus talks about feeding people and the poor more than Jesus talks about anything else. Jesus rarely talks about sex, or sexual behavior, or any of those things that we get all worked up about in other people's lives. And he only talks about when he's pushed to do so by someone else, because it wasn't an important thing for Jesus to teach us. Jesus was training us how to see the world, and what he was training us to do is to look where the need is and fill it, to restore human dignity to people, make sure their basic needs got met. Not to worry about their behavior, which is a thing we get all caught up in. Now, someone said, and I wish I knew who, but I heard this years ago, and I cannot for the life of me remember. I promise it's too wise, it didn't come from me. But someone once said, let me make sure I get this right, that Christians are too concerned with our own bodies and with other people's souls, when we should be concerned for our souls and other people's bodies. The problem, the place we get stuck, is that we're so worried about making sure that we have what we need, that we have all the comforts that we want and we think we deserve, that we forget about other people not even having basic needs met. And we pay less attention to what's happening in our own souls and taking a really good look at where we are being judgmental or self-centered or egotistical or proud or, name it. We don't look at those things. We look at those in other people because it's so much easier to see. Everybody else's glaring sins are obvious, right? But that's not what we're called to do. That's not what Jesus told us to do. And looking outward at everybody else's behavior is what gets us into trouble. When all Jesus wants us to do is feed and clothe and shelter and heal, and then look inside. We're not outside, just like the Pharisee, we're not outside of God's mercy because God moves away from us. We're outside of God's mercy because we turn away from our own inside where God lives and focus on everybody else's behavior. What they think, who they vote for, what they say out loud, what they do and how we judge that and write stories about it. All this time we spend out there. And not enough time going, what do I need to do? How can I make myself more like Jesus? What do I need to forgive and be forgiven for? Who do I need to reach out to in love and compassion? Not what you are doing. Not my concern. The tax collector finds his mercy because he looks in at his own soul where the mercy lives, where God lives in us. And they say the eyes are the window to the soul, right? And so where we look, if that's true, determines what we see. And where we look determines, at least in part, the condition of our soul. If I am so concerned about what everybody else is doing that I'm not paying attention, my own soul will deteriorate very quickly. And God's mercy will be very hard for me to feel. And the condition of our soul determines how we are in relationship to God. And so this is a story that you've heard, 50 times probably, the story of two men. But it's also a story of God's mercy and how God's mercy is always available to us, only if we look inward.